Hi, welcome to Urban Insights. I'm Jayashree Kurup. I have with me Chitra Jain. She is an architect, urban planner. She is a professor of urban planning at the School of Planning and Architecture, and she's also a office bearer at the NAREDCO MAHI at the center. And she is also leading the sustainability initiative at NAREDCO MAHI. This is the Shashwat Nirman. So, Chitra, very quickly, how did you join NAREDCO MAHI, and what is Shashwat Nirman all about?
See, as an architect planner, I have worked, in various spheres in the construction industry. Let's say, starting with architecture, then moving on to a combination of architecture and planning. Then also did some amount of turnkey interior projects. Went back to teaching, and then continued doing my consultancy in architecture. And then in about 2010 to 12 is when we set up our own, little real estate development, a boutique company. And so I've been a director with Samyak Properties and Infrastructure Private Limited. So what we are doing right now is doing a design and develop our own projects. So we are in the space right now of developing integrated housing colonies. So I wouldn't really say it's colony, but they are integrated developments. Let's say housing developments
Mhm.
where it's not just developing plots, but you also have to actually develop the entire project in its entirety, do the STP, the water, water storage tanks, and also do the commercial, do your community spaces, develop your park. So what you're delivering to a customer is a wholesome, residential area where everything is available. It's not that you come first, you have the plot, and then there's nothing else happening, so you're waiting for years. So now when they buy, they can build right on day one. So that's the kind of development that we are doing. So we are just putting in, our expertise that we have had in these last few, decades, and putting that into our own development. So it's a very fulfilling exercise. So now you can say that I'm in the space of real estate developer, but
Mhm.
also being an architect planner in the process. So it's like, I don't know how you would put it, but whether it's like saying have feet into both the boats, or you can say that this is a more holistic way of looking at and a very fulfilling way of working. I would say
Yes.
that it's extremely fulfilling because you can actually see what you are designing, take off on ground. So that apart, that's how I got into Naredco, because Naredco essentially is about developers, builders. The That's how it started. So there's a big team of developers and builders pan India, and 3 years ago, Naredco started the Naredco Mahi, which was the women's wing. So it started small, but then it grew, with leaps and bounds in the last 2 years. So, and I would say that we are more like a think tank for Naredco,
Mhm.
and we pick up topics which are traditionally not discussed. We offer, our expertise, because the Naredco Mahi team is not just about developers and builders, but it has got a fair, an extremely mixed group of, sales, marketing, legal. In fact, every branch of real estate, that to run a real estate business or a development, everything that comes under the ambit of real estate. So be it developers and builders. In addition to them, it is also people from the legal, marketing, sales, and every aspect of real estate. In fact, so Naredco Mahi is a very wholesome group, I would say. Really charged women who want to make a difference. So they are all in their different stages of their journey, I would say, in real estate. But I think everyone takes support from each other. So we have very interesting activities. We share knowledge. So we started a knowledge series where we bring in experts to give a talk. So pan India, wherever you are, you can just sit and log in and listen to those talks. And so we have done based on water. We have done based on RERA, which is which impacts everybody. So legal aspects. So various topics. So we just pick up topics which are relevant to the industry and relevant to all of us. And Mahi also came up with four initiatives. We started with three initially, and we have added Sashwat Nirman, which is to do about sustainability recently. So the first
Mhm.
three were to do with Nirmal Jal Prayas, which was talking about saving and conserving water,
Mhm.
and ways and means to do it, which included building up awareness right from school children. So there are programs where the Naredco team Mahi team interacts with school children. So bringing them on board, they are the water warriors, literally. As Ananta, who's one of our, founders of Mahi, would really call them. She says they are my little warriors. So that's one, vertical. The second is on skilling. So we believe that skilling is something which all of us have to continue to do, irrespective of whichever stage you are in your profession. But we also strongly believe that it is the women who are in the construction industry, especially the unskilled women labor, are really getting the raw end of the whole deal. They have always been called the unskilled labor, irrespective of the fact that they do as much work as the men. And except for, I always say that, except for actually laying the brick and putting the cement and mortar and checking and all that, other than that, they practically do everything. And by watching, they more or less know what is to be done. So it is just that one little leap, that if you give them that little push and equip them with a certification, I think they can also be in the space of a skilled manpower. So we are working on that, and we've done a few skilling rounds with women and men working on site. But also our focus is also looking to see how the women are faring in this whole process. The third vertical we have is on startups. So we give an ecosystem to youngsters who are in the startup space, are working around real estate, let us say, in various forms. It could be prop tech, it could be products, it could be an idea which they have and they want to just build on it. So we created what was called a dolphin tank, like instead of calling it Shark Tank, which kind of makes it a little more, scary prospect. But a dolphin tank is softer and appears more friendly. So that's what we really are. Is that we give whatever mentorship and whatever assistance they need in terms of like seeing their idea getting converted into reality. So these three verticals we were working on, and now recently added Sashwat Nirman, which is our fourth vertical on sustainability, because we believe that the builder and the construction industry really has to be the movers and shakers, really pushing this agenda of green and sustainable developments. So when the world is talking about zero energy buildings, they are talking about super energy and significantly lower energy buildings. So I think we have, considering our population and the number of buildings that we do pan India, I think we really have to push this agenda. And recently we were discussing that we realized that globally, India probably stands third in terms of the number of green buildings, certified buildings. But we don't see as much, in practice. We do hear of a lot of buildings that are certified, but looking at the quantum of work that really needs to be under the ambit of green, I think we have a long way to go. And so we are also looking to see what are the challenges and how we can move this forward. So looking at creating a sustainability cell, etc. So it's still in the discussion stage. So I think maybe a few months down the line, we'll have something really more concrete to discuss on under Sashwat Nirman.
Now, at this stage, you were part of the study tour that went to Singapore, right?
Yes,
What
that's
is
right.
it that you went expecting? What did you get, and how do you implement that into your milieu here?
Okay. So, see, Singapore is not a new country to me. I have been in and out of Singapore in the last 3 decades. I mean, Singapore was the first place I actually went to from out of India. This was when I was working in Tata Consulting Engineers. I'd just left Tata's, but at that time, RSP, who were the architects for the project we were working on in Bangalore, they wanted me to come and work from their Singapore office. So I went there to work with RSP for some time. So it was at that time, 3 decades ago, was a big eye opener for me. And we saw, things which we had only heard of probably. The scale of the projects, the scale of, curtain walling, the kind of cladding that they were doing, the sheer volume and space that they were creating in their commercial buildings. It was a big eye opener. I was looking at what the residential sector was doing. So that it was a big learning of how urban planning actually happens in Singapore. And again, I've been going back there about once a decade. I'm there on some pretext or the other. And latest one, which we did last month, I mean, the beginning of this month, I went there not really to see Singapore, but to see what new that they are doing in the space of, zero energy buildings and sustainable buildings. We keep seeing and hearing so many examples. So I thought this is a good opportunity to actually go experience this whole thing from a first person perspective, and also with NAREDCO having made arrangements to have presentations uh, from key construction related bodies over there. So I thought this would be the best way of getting to know from a design perspective, from also experience how the construction is being done. So that was what I was looking for when I went to Singapore this time, was to actually see, not just to see, but also hear from the actual designers how they went about it, and what are the laws, or how are they actually, creating so many, because Singapore is the fourth largest number of certified green certified buildings in the world. So how are they going about doing it? So it was a big good learning experience from there, because what we saw was how you're actually going back to the basics, and it is no more talking about air conditioning all the time and just increasing your energy, but they are consciously looking at how do you lower your energy consumption by actually going back to basic climatology, which was very interesting. I mean, we have learned this as architects. We learn about this when we are planning, but when it comes to actual application, uh, there was a phase when India was just copying what the Western world was doing. I mean, look at Gurgaon or look at Delhi, where look at the number of hot and sunny months that we have, and then we still go up and we do curtain wall buildings, and then increase our own energy costs in the process. Not to say that Singapore is not doing the same, but now they are consciously working on passive design techniques, which will actually reduce right from stage one. Like at your design stage, you can actually bring in a good reduction in your energy consumption if you design right, if you orient right, if you choose proper shading devices, if you design with corridors which are going to take away your direct impact of heat gain, and choose the right materials. So at the design stage, if you really spend some time sorting out all these basics and you get your basics right, you have achieved a good proportion of your energy saving that can happen. The second is when you're actually choosing the right kind of materials and technology. So, Singapore, we saw, prefabricated, pre-finished volumetric construction. We saw mass engineered timber buildings. So advanced precast construction systems, which we have, just read about it probably, but now you can actually see it. We stood in those buildings to see what it looks like, what does it feel like, and understood from there what are the challenges. And you just realize that it is only being conscious and committed you can actually achieve it. You design consciously. I mean, you could see panels where your plumbing and your all your conduiting, everything is already complete, and all you're doing is bringing it down and fixing it like you would work with Lego blocks. I mean, the amount of precision that has to be there, which means your tolerance is literally not even millimeters, because if something goes wrong, then the entire system would collapse. So we saw how precise they were and how it is possible to achieve. And I'm sure in India we can. We have the know-how, we have knowledge power, but we also have a huge manpower which is also there. With which Singapore was actually trying to reduce the number of manpower being used at site. So that to them was another area of saving that they were doing. That where 80 manpower could be used, they were trying to do the same work with 10 manpower. So for them that was a big saving that they were trying to get down to. So, and also designing and being conscious that you really don't need 100% air conditioning all the time. So we also saw areas where how are they reducing on the energy demand. So whether it was through lighting or for comfort, thermal comfort. So there were this was a really big learning where we realized, I mean, something very simple that we I have seen my daughter sometimes carries a little fan in her bag. She says when she's hot, she just holds the fan in front of her face. So something like this was literally what we found that they were doing in their office space, that you just have cool air coming on to just your working level. If you're in front of your table, you're comfortable. But the rest of the volume is being cooled by just, high volume, low speed fans. So it's those huge fans with long blades, and it is at very low speed, just turning and moving the air around. So, and they are working out a system wherein you're letting in cool air and you're taking out hot air from the top. So, which is very simple. I mean, we all have learned this as, hot air just escapes from the top. So, it's just a very, very simple logic that they have put it into practice. And they've reduced their air conditioning costs, they're reducing their lighting costs. Instead of lighting the entire space at a higher illumination level, so they're keeping the ambient lighting level lower but bringing in task lighting. So if you are actually working, you turn on your task lighting, otherwise you are comfortable with a much lower level of lighting, integrating your lighting and air cooling systems together. So there are a lot of small detailing that was also very interesting to see, that how all these can bring in a big saving to your energy costs. So it is, you're not compromising on design, you're not compromising on a comfort level, but there are ways of doing it. So first is to design right, then choose the right kind of materials technology, and actually consciously design where and how you want your comfort level, lighting levels, etc. In Singapore, they were really not looking at waste as one of their big areas of concern. For them, it was talking about energy or reducing their basic energy consumption is where they were concentrating on, which was one thing that I was looking to see. And I think for them, it was a learning when they heard from us saying that we are doing so much of work at a neighborhood level or at a household level. And for them, in taking care of waste was not really so critical, but yet they are doing. We saw examples of how they are going about handling their waste and how do they, tackle that. So that was what we, and I think these can very easily be brought in, discussed over here, and applied into our own projects. And so that's why I believe that sharing this information here back in India is definitely a big, big learning for our own developers and builders. Sometimes it's just sheer common sense or common knowledge, I would say. It is not that people don't know about it. We are not talking some rocket science. It is just that you just have to nudge them and say that, guys, now this is your checklist. Now you check this. If this is all possible to do, and if you implement these, and you will get this much saving in your project, learning and how you apply it back here is, I think it is the knowledge sharing, and study tours like this are really, really useful that way. And I think it's like you brush up, you go to a different country, you learn something different, how they are doing the same thing in a slightly different way, and see whether that's applicable to our country. If it is, we bring in that knowledge, and we share that knowledge here. So that way, I believe that we surely should be doing, more such study tours. And sustainability, I think, is really something all countries are talking about globally. For us, everybody should talk about it right now and work towards it. Not just buildings and construction, but also the way we live. I think live in a more sustainable way. Go about designing and planning our own cities in a more sustainable way. So big learning from Singapore, I would say.
So, with this learning, one, you are a professional. Two, you're a teacher, and three, you're part of the core team of Mahi, right? Putting this combination together, the learning, and that's a lot of learning that you were talking about. How does this get implemented in the Indian industry? How do you have any strategy to bring it back and share it with the rest of the people? 15, 16 people traveled to Singapore. What about the rest of the
Yeah.
group? How do you share it with them? The other thing is, how do you bring this, what you've learned there, how soon will it be implemented in your own projects? After all, you're in control of those projects, right? So those become showcases for you
Yes.
in implementing what you have.
Yes. Okay. The first question is, I mean, I'm answering your first question.
Yeah.
See, Singapore and India are not very, very different in terms of, climate, let us say. Of course, they are literally on the equator, but we are also in a very temperate zone, most part of India. So we have at least 10 to 11 months of good sunshine in most of the states, I would say. Let us, except for the north, would have the colder winter months. But by and large, in terms of climatic conditions, they are also in a hot, warm but humid climate, and they have brilliant sunshine through the year. But for us, it is lesser months. So one is like states which are on a very similar kind of a climatic band. So I think you can literally replicate what is being done. Not that we should replicate, but yes, there are examples that we can take from there. For example, the way they are using landscaping in buildings, using walls as your vertical gardens. So or the cooling techniques that they do, the shading devices that they use in their buildings, they are all very common that we also have been doing. If you look at the old Latins Delhi buildings, they've all been, you have vertical shading, you've got horizontal shading, and the buildings have been oriented, or the shading devices are oriented to make sure that you cut off your hot afternoon sun. So yeah, and now we have forgotten all these. We don't want to do shading devices. We say, oh, no, 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 nahi chahiye hame. But I really believe that we need to bring back all that learning again, and bring it and implement it into our own designs, use them here. I can see that movement happening, the change is happening. And I think that's one learning that I thought which can be used. And see, as students, they learn about all this. It's not that they don't learn. It is just that when you come out into into, let's say, the real estate market, the demand is for buildings to look very international. And I think that was kind of the outlook of the customers for, let's say, about 2 3 decades, that your buildings should look like they could be anywhere in the world. Though my question was, why should a building here in India look like anything out in the world? Like, why can't it look like an Indian? It's situated here. We use our Indian materials. We use our Indian, traditional construction techniques, and there are projects which, I'm sure are working on those lines. So I think the movement will happen. The second question was that where would I apply the knowledge that I gained from there into my own projects? The very first thing
Yeah.
which is easiest to do is probably in the landscaping. The very interesting ways in which they incorporate their, hard and soft landscaping, include water as an element, is all very interesting and very, you know, aesthetically very pleasing. So I can see that's one thing which I can pick up a few points from there, which we can apply here. But yes, in our own, buildings where we are talking of, commercial buildings, and we are talking of, community buildings, uh, I wouldn't say that we could directly replicate, but definitely I'm going to be more conscious when I'm designing now to see that, where can I bring in more passive architecture elements and cooling elements, in our own designs. One aspect which, actually I forgot
Yeah.
and got carried away with the good things that we saw, but there was also a very interesting information and, materials that we saw, where today you don't, have to do a solar panel looking like the rectangular panels which we are so
Yeah.
used to seeing being mounted on a metal frame. That's, of course, the traditional solar panels, that photovoltaic cells that we are used to. But we also found examples in Singapore where they have used membranes on the wall to be functioning as solar panels, and also incorporated tiny solar panel cells into glazing. So they can create all these beautiful patterns. So they call it the BAPV and the BIPV, that you're using both you can use any surface literally. So it
Yeah.
is not that you have to have it at a particular orientation and at an angle. So it is that when the ambient solar rays are around, so you can actually use any surface to generate solar energy for you and convert it into energy for human consumption and use. So, but it comes at a cost, and I think that is where the challenge for India lies, is that today the technologies and the material is all good, but it has also to be making financial sense for a builder or a developer to be using it in his or her building. So I think until we reach that stage where it is competitive for them to be in the market, otherwise as products they are fine. They are beautiful products. In fact, the glass, with the BIPV panels, you can have various combinations of colors, you can have patterns. So look at the immense possibility that is there from an architecture perspective. And you can have the panels which can also be bent into different shapes, and they can take different forms. So it just makes the whole design as a very magical process, that you can just imagine what you want, and then you have the material to actually fabricate and use it in the buildings. They can be implemented. But India's challenge would be to see how competitive is it in the market in terms of its availability and its pricing. So until then, I think we are only going to be looking at buildings abroad and say, oh wow, they look nice. But if they have to come into the Indian market in a big way, it has to make financial sense to the builder or the developer.
Or manufacture it locally, right?
Yes, if it's to be manufactured locally, yeah, the technology comes in, the know-how comes in, and then the Indian partner here manufactures. I think we saw that happening in the tiles industry. There was a time when most good tiles were imported, and then we were just looking at any imported tile at such a marked up price, and then say that, oh my God, the tiles are so expensive. So it was making sense to actually use stone than tile, because it's much richer in finish and everything. But today, look at what is happening from Gujarat. I mean, Morbi is literally controlling the tile market today, and you get wonderful tiles which we only used to see usually from imported tiles. Today everything is manufactured here, so soon it would come in, but till then I think we are still facing that bit of a challenge on materials. If someone wants to use it as a USP for the project, that's great. If they can bring in smaller quantities and then use it only for their building. But to make a change in the market as as a product to be used by anybody and everybody, then it has to be more competitively priced.
Chitra, you also had a session with the Indian High Commissioner there, right? Talk about that
Yes.
interaction and how that played out.
Yes. Well, from when we went from here, we had on our agenda meeting, of course, the High Commissioner from India in Singapore. To understand from his perspective, being in Singapore as a High Commissioner. I mean, he's going to be looking at the city and reacting to the city in a very different way, from what we are looking at. So he's going to be not only looking at from a construction industry perspective, but the kind of bilateral relations and whatever collaborations that can happen between the two countries. So it was a beautiful, morning we had, where he was also distributing certificates for our, we had a leadership program which was conducted here by Force School of Management. And so we had completed our course here in Delhi, and I mean, not prize, the certificate distribution was to happen there in Singapore. And the High Commissioner very graciously accepted to do the honors. And so that morning was a mix of, a one-to-one interaction with the High Commissioner on, of course, we were discussing a lot more focused towards the construction industry, but also was generally to understand, how, what was his feeling of being there in Singapore for the last year and a half, and what he could share about his experience staying there in Singapore. So yes, and we had a good interaction where we picked up on, how he highlighted how development happens first, and then the infrastructure happens first, and then the development just falls into place. So we were just looking at the contrast, like how in India the development happens, the planning and the development happens, but the infrastructure is a little slow in reaching the developed areas. So we have that lag in between, which is not happening in Singapore. So that was when we were just looking at areas to see that how we are similar in various ways, but also where we are doing things slightly differently. So this was one area which he pointed out, and we all had one discussion on that. And the second was in terms of, like, the very structure of how a project or a development can happen, how things are done differently. Both are democracies, but in Singapore, how the because the government has greater control over land, so it is easier for them to push a development or a project, see it from concept to completion in a given time frame, which for us in India is most of the time is a challenge, beginning from land acquisition to actually getting the project to be completed in a time frame. We do have our own challenges. So of course, that's not something that we can solve immediately. But yes, if you're conscious that this is a way of doing it, we can see how we can ease things out in our democratic setup. The third was which are the how development really happens, and how they involve the citizens of Singapore, the URA, that's their urban regeneration is done in a very different way as compared to what we do here. Over there, they take it in a very serious fashion, starting from concept. It is then developed, it is shared with the citizens, wait for their reaction, and then it happens. And the redevelopment happens much faster. Here we wait for decades to say that, okay, fine, now it is time to redevelop. Over there, redevelopment is literally like about 10, 15 years, you can see new buildings, new things happening. And so there's always constantly dynamism which is there. They have very small area, but still so much happening in that small area. Reclaiming, land to construct more is another thing which is happening at such a big scale, and that reclamation we don't see here. But yes, so we were discussing with the High Commissioner was to see new things that are happening in Singapore, and we also touched upon the issues with immigrant construction workers who come from India, which is like a big percentage which comes to work in Singapore. And apparently, whatever issues that they have. So he was talking about how they kind of very consciously handle the Indian, labor who comes into work in Singapore. But that was really not immediately our focus. So we were not talking so much about it, but more to do with how development happens in Singapore versus in India.
And do you think that you would be part of further study tours in other countries as well? You would like to be?
Yeah, definitely I would. See, Singapore was a country I already knew, but still I had so
Mm.
much to learn. So if
Yeah.
I am going to a country where I've not been to before, or I'm not, very familiar with, then definitely the learning would be even more. Culturally, I knew what Singapore was all about, and I've lived there
Mm.
for a few months there, and I've been visiting often. So it's at least, and it feels so much closer. Tamil is one of their actually
Yeah.
official languages, in which even in a metro, the announcements are in Tamil. And so you
Yeah.
feel somehow you're very closely connected. But countries which are not probably so culturally similar to ours, the learning would definitely be much, much greater there. So I definitely look forward to more study tours. I think we should be doing at least once, one trip a year at least is what I think we
Mm.
should aim for. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Chitra. All the best. Found this video useful? Please subscribe to this channel for more such videos. Do like and share with as many people as you can.